Okay, let's talk about Africa. Home to, what, 1 in every 5 people on this planet. It's huge.
It really is. And the stat that always gets me is that over half the population there is still unbanked.
Over half. That's just staggering when you think about the scale.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to dive into the fintech trends shaping the future over there. It's such a dynamic scene.
Absolutely. And we've been looking at some of the, the buzz on YouTube about this. Lots of really interesting discussions happening.
Yeah, we've sifted through those video transcripts trying to pull out the key shifts, the real opportunities in African fintech.
Think of this as your shortcut, really. A way to get up to speed on this fast-moving space.
Exactly. We know you want that deep understanding, but, quickly, without getting lost in the weeds.
So that's the plan. Unpack the big stuff. And the numbers alone are pretty compelling, aren't they?
They really are. I mean, the sheer amount of fintech activity,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to miss.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Get this. A third of African scale-ups. The company's really hitting their stride, raising over $1 million. They're fintechs.
A third. That's a huge concentration of investment. Tells you where the action is.
It really does. And then there's the unicorn thing.
Ah, yes, the billion-dollar club.
Fintech just dominates. 6 out of the 7 unicorns coming out of Africa are fintech companies.
6 out of 7. Wow. Why do you think fintech specifically is seeing that kind of, explosion?
Well, I think it comes down to the fundamental problems they're solving, right? Financial inclusion is such a massive challenge and opportunity.
The need is just incredibly high.
Exactly. And maybe the barriers to entry compared to some other heavy industries are a bit lower. Plus, you've got this huge market that's really hungry for digital solutions.
It paints a picture of Africa as this, key frontier for fintech.
Yeah.
It feels less like small steps and more like a real revolution happening.
I think that's fair to say. A genuine transformation.
And one term that kept popping up in those YouTube discussions we looked at was open banking.
Ah, yes. Open banking.
For anyone listening who maybe hasn't come across it much, can you break that down for us? What is it?
Sure. So open banking, it's a relatively new idea in finance. Basically, it's a system that lets third-party developers think fintech startups build their own apps and services by securely plugging into the existing bank's systems.
Okay, so it's about connecting things up, making the ecosystem more open.
Precisely. With the customers okay, of course, banks and other financial places securely share specific financial data.
With who, exactly?
With these approved third parties, usually through things called APIs, application programming interfaces.
APIs, right. Heard of those? They're like secure messengers between software.
That's a good way to put it. They let different systems talk to each other and share specific information securely.
Okay, so customer says yes. Trusted companies get some data via these APIs. Why is that potentially such a big deal, especially for Africa?
Well, some people are calling it the biggest game changer since mobile money. And you can see why, right?
Because of that huge unbanked population we mentioned.
Yeah. Exactly. There's just this massive demand for financial services that are, innovative, easy to use, affordable, secure. Open banking could deliver that on a whole new scale.
And the YouTube sources really hammered home Africa's suitability for this model. What makes it such fertile ground?
I think it's the combination of size and diversity. You've got so many different countries, different regulations, different market needs.
Right.
Open banking lets fintechs create really specific, tailored solutions for particular groups or needs. And APIs make it easier to potentially scale those solutions.
Can you give us a sort of concrete example? How does this actually help someone day to day?
Okay, yeah. Think about someone who banks with, say, 2 different banks and maybe uses a mobile money service too.
Pretty common scenario, I imagine.
Right. And keeping track of everything, spending, budgets, it can be a real hassle, jumping between apps or statements.
Tell me about it.
So imagine a personal finance management app, a PFM app. Using open banking APIs, it could securely connect to all those accounts and give you one single place to see all your income, all your spending, your savings goals. A unified view.
So no more juggling. Everything's right there.
Exactly. There's an app in the UK called Emma that does this really well.
Emma, okay.
It pulls in all your transactions, analyzes spending, helps you budget, even suggests hey, you're spending a lot on X, maybe try Y.
That sounds incredibly useful, like a mini financial advisor in your pocket.
Pretty much. It's very empowering.
So where did this whole open banking idea even start?
It really kicked off in the European Union back in 2015. They brought in this thing called the Revised Payment Services Directive, or PSD2.
PSD2, right.
And the main goals were boosting competition and innovation in payments, plus making online payments safer. A key part was making banks give approved third parties access to customer data via APIs with consent.
So the EU basically mandated it, setting the stage.
Pretty much. And then others followed the UK, Australia, Hong Kong. And now, as those YouTube chats show, Africa is really getting into it, setting up its own frameworks.
Which brings us right back to the African context. You mentioned that World Bank figure earlier, 45% unbanked in sub-Saharan Africa in 2021. That lack of access, what does it really mean for people?
It's a huge barrier. It limits your ability to save safely, to invest, even just to participate fully in the economy. It holds people back.
A fundamental challenge. And open banking, how does it directly address that?
Well, the hope is it fosters a more open and competitive financial world by letting fintechs innovate on top of existing bank infrastructure.
You get more choices, lower costs maybe?
Potentially, yes. More innovation, maybe lower costs, and crucially, better financial inclusion, reaching people who've been left out.
The videos also mentioned benefits for small businesses, right? Like getting loans.
Yeah, that's a big one. Think about a small business owner. Getting a loan can be tough, proving your financial health.
Lots of paperwork, I bet.
Exactly. With open banking, they could securely share their real-time transaction data with lenders.
So the lender gets a clearer, faster picture of the business.
Right, which could mean quicker loan approvals, maybe better terms. It just makes the process smoother and potentially fairer.
And maybe new kinds of digital payments for people without traditional accounts.
That too. Tailored solutions for groups who are currently underserved. It really is about unlocking opportunity.
Now, which countries are really pushing forward with this? The videos highlighted a few pioneers.
Yeah, definitely. While it's still early days for like a continent-wide standard, some countries are making real strides. Nigeria is a key one.
What are they doing in Nigeria?
They've got the Nigerian Open Banking API framework, an initiative called Open Banking Nigeria, and importantly, the central bank issued regulations back in early 2021 spelling out the rules for data sharing.
That regulatory clarity must help a lot. Who else?
Kenya's another major player. They've set up a government working group on open banking.
Okay.
And the central bank's digitalization plan explicitly supports it, talking about the need for API regulations. Even the Treasury is drafting policy on the infrastructure and, importantly, consumer protection side.
Sounds like a joined-up effort there. Any others?
South Africa's Financial Sector Conduct Authority has put out draft regulations, too, paving the way for third-party access. And Ghana is interesting. Their 2019 Payment Systems and Services Act actually included provisions for open banking early on. They even set up a specific payment systems department.
So, definite momentum in key hubs across the continent. But it can't all be smooth sailing. The YouTube discussions must have touched on challenges, too.
Oh, absolutely. There are significant hurdles.
Like what? What are the main roadblocks?
Well, number one for many areas is still basic digital infrastructure. Reliable internet connectivity isn't everywhere, right?
The digital divide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If people can't easily get online, they can't access these digital financial services. So it limits the reach, especially in rural areas.
A foundational issue. What else?
There's also some reluctance from the banks themselves.
To share data.
Yeah. Concerns about privacy, security, maybe losing a competitive edge. It's understandable, but it can slow down innovation.
The banks need to feel comfortable with the security and the standards.
Which leads to another point, the APIs themselves. There's often a lack of standardization. Different banks, different countries doing things differently.
Makes it hard for a fintech to build something that works everywhere.
Exactly. It creates fragmentation. And finally, in many places, the specific rules, the regulatory frameworks for open banking are still being developed or just aren't there yet.
Creates uncertainty for everyone involved.
Right. So you've got this mix of tech, institutional, and regulatory challenges to navigate.
Okay, so challenges are clear. But despite those, the opportunities seem, well, huge. What are the big potential wins here?
They really are transformative. You could see completely new ways to pay digitally emerge, things that cut the cost and hassle of transactions, especially outside the big cities.
That could really boost local economy.
For sure. And then there's the boost for businesses, particularly SMEs and startups. Better access to data, more financial service options. It could really level the playing field.
Empowering entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And maybe the biggest win, long term, improving financial literacy, making finance more accessible, more transparent. It helps people make better decisions with their money.
It keeps coming back to that core idea, inclusion and empowerment. So wrapping this up, what are the main things we should take away from this deep dive into African fintech and open banking?
I'd say first, the fintech revolution in Africa is real and significant. Second, open banking is emerging as a really powerful force within that.
But it's not flicking a switch, is it?
No, definitely not. There's clear progress in places like Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, but big challenges remain infrastructure. Getting banks fully on board, standardizing APIs, getting the regulations right. These need tackling.
But the potential upside is enormous.
Huge. Open banking can seriously build on what mobile money started, driving more inclusion, sparking more innovation, and ultimately fueling real economic growth across Africa.
And here's something to really chew on. What if, as open banking develops and gets regulated properly, Africa doesn't just catch up, but actually leapfrogs some of the older legacy financial systems we see elsewhere?
That's a fascinating thought.
What completely new economic models or possibilities could open up for people and businesses as these systems connect and get smarter? What innovations might we see that we haven't even imagined yet? Definitely something to think about.
Absolutely.
And look, if you want to dig deeper yourself after listening, the kinds of terms people are using in these online discussions, for searching and finding more.
Yeah, things like African fintech, obviously, fintech trends, open banking Africa.
Right. Also, financial inclusion Africa, Africa tech, innovation Africa, and digital finance Africa.
Those should give you a good starting point for your own exploration.